was the kind of evening you don't forget. Skyline glowing, laughter floating in the air, the clink of glasses echoing across a rooftop bar in Soho. Olivia stood there, right in the center of it all. Champagne in hand, smile on her face, promotion secured, applause all around. She had made it. Years of hard work finally rewarded, but something wasn't right. Her heart felt tight, not from excitement, but from a strange, quiet tension. It wasn't the city noise or the crowd. It was the undercurrent, the subtle stiffness in certain smiles, the overly cheerful voice that seemed just a beat too loud, the way someone averted their gaze just a moment too long when she entered the circle. And then there was the hug, warm arms, cold eyes. It hit her in that moment. Not everyone was celebrating. Some were just pretending. You see, we like to believe we're good judges of character. We think we know who truly supports us. But the truth? Many of the most dangerous people in your life aren't your enemies. They're the ones closest to you. They show up to your parties. They like your posts. They call you friend. But deep down, behind their congratulations, they're rooting for you to fall. Jealousy doesn't always show its face. It hides behind politeness. It's not just what people say. It's what they don't say. It's not just the compliment. It's the tone behind it. It's not the silence, but the heavy weight it carries. Olivia's gut wasn't lying. That night, one of her co-workers, who had been her biggest cheerleader, had already started gossiping about her. Not out of concern, out of envy. So what? Do you do when the people clapping the loudest are the ones most eager to see you trip? This isn't just Olivia's story. It's mine. It's yours. It's anyone who's ever achieved something and then felt a chill from those who should have been warm. The truth is, success doesn't always bring connection. Sometimes it reveals division. And if you don't know how to recognize envy and falsehood, you'll let the wrong people too close. You'll open your heart to those who are secretly sharpening their knives behind your back. That's where Stoic philosophy comes in, not as ancient wisdom locked in dusty books, but as a brutally clear modern tool to help you see, to strip away the performance, to recognize what's real and what's just a mask. This video will give you 10 powerful ways to spot envy and falsehood in others using timeless Stoic principles. And not just so you can protect yourself, but so you can grow stronger, live wiser, and build relationships that are rooted in authenticity. But I'll warn you, once you learn to see clearly, you can't unsee. So if you've ever walked into a room and felt that something wasn't quite right, if you've ever had a friend who felt more like a rival or a colleague whose praise left a strange taste, you need to watch this until the very end. Because what you discover may change the way you see the people in your life forever. And before we go deeper, I just ask you one small thing. If this message already speaks to something you felt before, hit that subscribe button. Your support helps this channel bring more truth, more strength, and more clarity to those who need it. Let's build a space of wisdom together. Now, a quick challenge to start our journey. You're celebrating a huge personal win. One of your close friends says, "I'm so happy for you. I always knew you'd get there." But later, you overhear them telling someone, "Yeah, she just got lucky. Right place, right time." What do? A. Confront them directly and ask for honesty. B. Step back, observe them more, and keep your guard up. Drop your answer in the comments, A or B. Let's see how many of us have faced this silent storm and how we've learned to navigate it. Olivia sat at her desk weeks after the rooftop celebration, reflecting not just on her recent success, but on what had followed. The applause had faded. The social media likes had plateaued. And in that quiet, something else lingered. An unease that wouldn't go away. It wasn't paranoia. It was clarity, because when the noise dies down, patterns speak. She started noticing little things. Alex, her coworker who had always promised support, now seemed to vanish every time she actually needed him. When she asked for help preparing for a major presentation, he was swamped. But he had time to drop into the boss's office and casually mention collaborative ideas that weren't his. When she succeeded, he was there to smile. But when she struggled, he disappeared. That's when it hit her. People lie with words all the time, but actions never lie. Not ever. It's a brutal truth, but one the Stoics knew all too well. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you should never waste time arguing about what a good person should be. Just be one. Today, in our hyper-curated world of polished personas and performative support, that advice might be more urgent than ever. Anyone can say the right thing. Anyone can clap for you in public. But the real test of sincerity lies in the quiet, unfiltered moments. Does someone show up when there's nothing in it for them? Do they keep their word when no one is watching? Do their actions reflect their values or just their agenda? Olivia thought back to an email she once got from Alex. "Let me know if you ever need a sounding board. I've got your back." But when she actually sent over a draft strategy and asked for feedback, there was silence, no response, not even a polite decline. Just ghosted. She remembered how he praised her idea in the group meeting, but rolled his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. How he'd say, "Great job," then whisper criticisms to others behind closed doors. This is what falsehood looks like. It's not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's subtle. But the signs are always there, and they always point somewhere deeper. They point to who a person really is beneath the script they perform for the world. And what's worse, we often choose not to see it, because we want to believe the best in people, because it's easier to hold on to illusions than to confront betrayal. But Stoic wisdom demands we seek truth over comfort, reality over fantasy. So Olivia stopped listening to what people said. She started watching instead. Who volunteered to help when there was no credit to gain? Who stood up for others when it wasn't popular? Who treated her with respect when no one else was around to notice? That shift changed everything. She began to value stillness over speeches, presence over promises. She looked beyond charisma and charm and into character, the kind that only shows up when the room is empty and there's nothing to win. She remembered a junior associate named Aaron, quiet, overlooked, never flashy. But when Olivia was swamped and drowning under deadlines, Aaron stayed late without being asked, just to help her organize deliverables. No announcement, no self-promotion, just kindness, consistent and unforced. That's what real support looks like. Not the noise, but the follow-through. Not the words, but the weight people carry beside you. We live in a time where manipulation can be dressed in warmth and envy disguised as concern. But the truth always leaks out, in tone, in timing, in the long arc of behavior. So if you're unsure who's real in your life, do what Olivia did. Turn down the volume on their words and turn up the volume on their actions. Watch what they do when you win. Watch closer when you fail. Look at what they invest in when no one's watching. Because those moments, quiet, raw, unfiltered, reveal what no compliment ever could. And once you learn to read that language, you'll never see people the same way again. Some truths are revealed not in how people treat us, but in how they treat those who have nothing to offer them. Olivia learned this during a business trip to Tokyo, a city of precision, politeness, and unspoken hierarchies. It was her first time traveling internationally as part of the leadership team, and she was excited to experience the culture firsthand. But more than the temples or meetings, what stayed with her was a single dinner at a quiet sushi bar off a side street in Shibuya. Her colleague Lydia was also on the trip. Back at the office in New York, Lydia had a reputation for being charming, intelligent, and impossibly well-connected. She was the kind of person who always knew the right thing to say to the right people. Olivia had admired her, until that night. The sushi bar was run by an elderly couple. The space was warm, traditional, and intimate. No glossy menus, no translation, apps, just quiet craftsmanship. When the chef approached with a smile and presented the next course, Lydia waved him off with a clipped tone and complained that she didn't eat whatever that was. Her voice was loud, disrespectful. The chef's expression didn't change, but the entire mood of the room shifted. Later, when their division's senior executive arrived to join them, Lydia's demeanor transformed. She became polished, attentive, even deferential. She asked thoughtful questions. She laughed at every joke. She spoke of cultural appreciation and how much she valued humility in business. Olivia watched all this in silence, stunned by the contrast. In that moment, she understood something Stoicism had been whispering to her for months. Character isn't proven in the presence of power, but in the presence of the powerless. Anyone can act kind when it benefits them. But how someone treats those who can't advance their agenda, that reveals everything. Epictetus, who was once enslaved and later became one of the greatest Stoic teachers, taught that all people deserve dignity, not because of status, but because of their shared humanity. That principle isn't just philosophical, it's practical. Because a person who disrespects those they see as lesser will eventually do the same to you when they no longer need you. Olivia saw it again at the hotel. Lydia snapped at a bellhop for taking too long with her luggage. No thank you. No acknowledgement. Just a dismissive hand wave. But later, she gushed to their regional director about how well the hotel staff took care of her. False kindness is loud. Real respect is quiet, consistent, and unconditional. When Olivia returned home, she couldn't unsee what she had seen. She started paying more attention, not just to how her colleagues treated executives or clients, but how they treated interns, receptionists, and even each other when no one important was around. She noticed that the people she had once seen as leaders were often just performers. And the ones who didn't seek the spotlight, people like Aaron, were the ones who actually lived by values. There's something deeply unsettling about realizing that admiration can be misplaced. But Stoicism doesn't ask us to judge others harshly. It asks us to see clearly, to evaluate, and to choose who we surround ourselves with based not on charm, but on consistency of character. This principle goes beyond the workplace. It shows up in friendships, family dynamics, and everyday interactions. The friend who's kind to you but cruel to a waiter. The partner who's warm in public but cold at home. The influencer who preaches compassion online but mocks strangers behind closed doors. Olivia no longer admired those who played the game well. She admired those who stayed kind when there was no one to impress. She realized that power doesn't corrupt, it reveals. And envy often hides in those who are desperate to be seen, but treat others as invisible. The next time someone praises you, watch how they treat those they think don't matter. Because one day, that could be you, or someone you care about. And when masks fall, it's too late to wish you'd paid more attention. The most dangerous people aren't the ones who hate openly. They're the ones who smile at you, then step on others when the spotlight dims. And if you want to build a life of peace, resilience, and meaning, choose your circle not by how they treat you when you're rising, but how they treat everyone. When there's nothing to gain, that's where integrity lives. That's where truth hides. And that's the standard Stoicism dares us all to uphold. There's something powerful about patterns. They don't lie. They don't exaggerate. They don't flatter or conceal. While words can be rehearsed and expressions carefully curated, the truth always leaks through patterns, especially in how someone behaves across time, space, and different people. Olivia learned this the hard way. Back at her company in New York, she had long respected her manager, Darren. He was sharp, charismatic, and knew how to rally the team. During team-building meetings, he talked passionately about work-life balance, about caring for mental health, about leading with empathy. It sounded noble. It sounded like the kind of leadership Olivia had hoped to be a part of. But then came the deadlines. The pressure mounted, and slowly Darren's mask began to crack. He stopped asking how people were doing. He started rewarding those who worked late into the night while shaming anyone who requested time off. Olivia once overheard him saying, if they really cared, they'd sacrifice like I do. The man who once advocated for boundaries now weaponized them against his team. That's when Olivia remembered something she'd read from Seneca. It's not what a man says, but what he does that shows his soul. And the more she paid attention, the more she realized how many people around her were shapeshifters. People like Darren didn't contradict themselves in loud, obvious ways. The inconsistency was subtle, but it showed in how they adjusted their tone depending on who they were with. He was respectful with senior leadership, dismissive with junior staff. He praised inclusivity, but only mentored those who mirrored. his own personality and ambition. It became clear to Olivia that consistency isn't about perfection. It's about alignment. When someone's values and actions walk hand in hand, you can trust them, even if they're not always polished or agreeable. But when their principles change with proximity to power, you need to be cautious. That's not leadership. That's performance. And it wasn't just inconsistency she noticed. There was something else, something even more insidious. The comparisons. It started subtly during a brainstorming session in Miami. Olivia had pitched an idea she believed in, one she'd spent weeks refining. A colleague responded with a shrug and said, "It's fine, but it's no Brian-level concept." The room chuckled lightly. Olivia smiled, but something in her sank. Brian had left the company months ago. He was talented, yes, but his name had become something else, a quiet weapon used to undermine others, especially her. It wasn't the first time someone had invoked him during a moment Olivia was trying to shine. At first, she thought she was being sensitive, but it kept happening. Brian used to... That's not how Brian would... Even in her successes, there was a ghost in the room she had to compete with, someone no longer even there. This is how envy speaks when it doesn't want to sound petty, through comparisons that seem harmless on the surface but are designed to shrink you. It's the colleague who can't just say "great job," but has to follow it with "reminds me of when X did that better." It's the friend who celebrates your promotion by reminding you of someone younger who got there faster. Comparisons, especially when uninvited, are rarely about the person being praised. They're about the speaker trying to regain a sense of control, superiority, or relevance. Olivia realized something else too. People who constantly compare others usually carry unresolved insecurity. Because secure people don't measure your value against someone else's shadow. They see you as you are, here, now. And she began to check herself. Had she ever done the same? Had she unintentionally made someone else feel less by invoking a comparison they never asked for? That's the uncomfortable beauty of Stoic awareness. It doesn't just help you spot the faults in others, it demands you examine your own. So, Olivia made a shift. She started building connections based on who people truly were, not who they reminded her of. She stopped entertaining conversations rooted in comparison. When someone brought up Brian again, she gently redirected the focus. That's his style. This is mine. Because being compared isn't just exhausting, it's dehumanizing. And no one thrives when constantly being measured against someone else's highlight reel. The Stoics knew that self-worth must come from within, not from fluctuating standards set by others. Inconsistency in action and speech, and compulsive comparison of people are two of the clearest signs of deeper unrest, either within the one doing it or the relationship itself. Olivia kept watching, and what she saw in patterns, both in others and in herself, became her clearest guide for who belonged in her world and who never truly did. In a world obsessed with quick impressions and shallow praise, the patterns we ignore are the very truths that will one day define our peace or take it away. Failure doesn't just test our resilience, it reveals our truth. When everything goes right, most people are gracious, composed, and agreeable. But when things fall apart, when plans unravel and egos are bruised, that's when the mask slips. That's when people show you exactly who they are. Olivia learned this in the tense weeks that followed the launch of a major project, one that had the full attention of the leadership team. She had worked closely with the product division, presenting new strategy insights that, at the time, had been enthusiastically approved. Everything was lined up for success until it wasn't. Bugs in the system, delayed rollout, poor user engagement. Within days, what was supposed to be a win turned into a crisis. And in the center of that storm stood Mark, the CTO of the startup partner they had brought in for technical integration. He had always appeared composed, confident, even likable in a reserved kind of way. But when the pressure hit, he transformed. Instead of owning up to the gaps in communication and lack of proper QA, Mark turned defensive, then vicious. He shifted blame onto the junior engineers, then onto the marketing team. He claimed that Olivia's team hadn't clarified deliverables and hinted in a leadership debrief that her insights had misguided expectations. No direct accusations, just enough doubt to deflect heat from himself. Olivia was stunned. Mark had seemed like a professional, a leader. But under the weight of failure, his instinct wasn't to take responsibility. It was to survive, no matter who he had to throw under the bus. That's when Olivia began to think about the Stoic view of adversity. Seneca wrote, "Fire tests gold, adversity tests the brave." And now, more than ever, she understood the brilliance of that philosophy. Adversity doesn't make a person cruel, bitter, or deceptive. It reveals that they already were. Failure is not a verdict, it's a mirror. And in that mirror, you see whether someone is grounded in values or merely in appearances. But the clearest test of character isn't just how someone handles their own failure. It's also how they respond to being criticized by others. A few weeks after the project collapse, Olivia offered careful, constructive feedback to Lucas, a mid-level analyst she had mentored. She pointed out a few blind spots in his reporting that had added confusion to the early phase of the launch. She expected a thoughtful dialogue. Instead, Lucas shut down. His face flushed, his tone hardened, and within hours, he had confided in others that Olivia was targeting him unfairly. It wasn't the disagreement that hurt. It was the unwillingness to engage with truth. Lucas didn't want clarity. He wanted to protect his pride. That moment reminded Olivia of another lesson from Marcus Aurelius. If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change. It is the truth I seek. The Stoics didn't see criticism as humiliation. They saw it as a gift, but only those rooted in strength can receive that gift without flinching. Olivia took a step back to reflect. How had she responded to failure in her own life? Had she ever shifted blame out of fear? Had she ever dismissed feedback because it made her uncomfortable? We all have, but the difference lies in whether we learn or deflect. She realized the people she respected most weren't the ones who never failed. They were the ones who faced their failures with honesty. The colleague who admitted to missing a deadline and offered a plan to make it right. The junior teammate who, after receiving hard feedback, asked for mentorship instead of sympathy. The friend who, after saying something hurtful in a heated moment, called back the next day to apologize without excuse. These are the people who carry integrity like a compass, not just when things go smoothly, but when the path gets rough and the ego is exposed. In a culture obsessed with perfection, it's easy to think failure is something to hide. But for Olivia, it became a flashlight. The ones who respond to failure with humility, curiosity, and accountability, those are the ones you want in your life, and the ones who lie, lash out, or go silent in the face of truth. That's a sign to step back, no matter how polished their exterior may be. Failure is not the end of character, it's the start of its revelation. And those revelations, when you pay attention, are what will ultimately protect your peace or poison it. The choice of who you surround yourself with becomes clearer when you look beyond applause and into the shadows failure casts, because that's where you'll find who truly belongs. It started as a whisper, nothing you could put your finger on, just a quiet hum beneath the surface. Olivia had always been someone who trusted data, facts, and the logic of what could be explained. But over the years, she began to realize that her most important guide often wasn't external, it was internal. Her inner voice, and the times she ignored it. Those were the moments she regretted the most. There was a colleague at work, someone who seemed endlessly helpful. Friendly, engaging, always quick with encouragement. On paper, the kind of person anyone would feel lucky to have in their corner. But something about him made Olivia tense, not overtly, just a subtle discomfort she couldn't shake. She'd leave conversations with him feeling drained, second-guessing things she'd said, sometimes feeling smaller without knowing why. She tried to explain it to herself. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe she was just stressed. But time after time, the feeling returned. And it wasn't until months later, when private messages he'd sent about her came to light, messages full of passive aggression, subtle, undercutting, and strategic manipulation, that she realized she had known all along. She just hadn't listened. Stoicism teaches us to tune into what we can control, and our own awareness is one of the most powerful tools we have. That awareness doesn't always come with hard evidence or verbal proof. Sometimes it begins with intuition, a gut feeling, a sense that something doesn't line up, even if everything appears polished on the surface. But we live in a world that trains us to override that voice, to be polite, to give people the benefit of the doubt, to rationalize what we feel because we're afraid of being too sensitive, too dramatic, too cynical. And in doing so, we often silence the very signal that's trying to protect us. Olivia began practicing what she called quiet checking. After each interaction, especially ones that felt off, she'd sit with her feelings before brushing them away. Was the discomfort rooted in insecurity, or in something unspoken the other person had projected? Had there been micro-expressions, moments of contradiction between tone and words? Did she feel energized after the interaction, or subtly diminished? She started journaling these reflections. Not long, drawn-out entries, just a few honest sentences. And over time, a pattern emerged. The people who made her question her worth or dim her enthusiasm were the same people who, eventually, proved they weren't safe. Your intuition is ancient. It's primal. It's designed to sense shifts in tone, energy, expression, things language can't always name. It's a wisdom beyond words. And while Stoicism asks us to use reason as our compass, it also reminds us to be attuned to reality, to not ignore the signs simply because they're inconvenient. When Olivia began harmonizing her intuition with her reasoning, clarity came quickly. She didn't need dramatic confrontations. She didn't need to expose people. She simply adjusted her closeness. She created emotional space where necessary. And in that space, peace grew. But this clarity doesn't just help us identify the people around us. It turns inward too. She began to notice how her own behavior shifted when she was around people she didn't trust. The way she held her shoulders. The way her laughter sounded a little forced. The way she rushed to explain herself. Her body was speaking before her mind had caught up. That's the power of internal listening. It shows you not just who others are, but who you become in their presence. Stoicism teaches that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. But Olivia realized the people you keep near are often the ink. And if you want a soul that is calm, centered, and courageous, you must choose relationships that don't pollute that ink with jealousy, manipulation, or deceit. By the time she learned to truly trust that inner whisper, her world had changed. Not dramatically, not loudly, but profoundly. She felt lighter in rooms she once dreaded. She felt clearer when making decisions. She no longer needed to convince herself of someone's goodness when her body was already saying no. And that is perhaps the most stoic truth of all. When you seek truth without illusion, both in others and in yourself, you begin to live not just wisely, but freely. The world won't always applaud you for listening to your gut. Some will say you're overreacting. Some will say you misread. But you'll know. You'll know because peace doesn't lie, and neither does your inner voice, when you finally decide to hear it. Let that voice be your quiet compass. It will never scream, but it will never steer you wrong. Olivia's journey wasn't marked by one dramatic betrayal or single moment of heartbreak. It was built through a series of subtle awakenings, quiet realizations that unfolded in elevators, emails, rooftop celebrations, and the awkward silences that followed a seemingly friendly conversation. What began as a simple career milestone became a profound reckoning with the nature of trust, envy, and authenticity. She had walked into that rooftop party in Soho full of excitement, only to walk away with an unsettling feeling in her chest. That moment became the first signal in a long line of emotional breadcrumbs. She began to observe more closely, watching not just what people said, but what they did when no one was watching. She paid attention to who disappeared when she struggled and who showed up without needing recognition. She learned to spot the subtle cruelty and flattery, the arrogance in how someone treated a waiter, and the insecurity hidden behind casual comparisons. She saw how people's masks cracked under pressure, and how their real selves surfaced in failure. She listened more deeply, not just to words, but to her own instincts, and she began making small but powerful shifts. She stopped explaining away discomfort. She stopped staying loyal to people who made her doubt her worth. She stopped mistaking presence for support. In doing so, Olivia didn't become colder. She became wiser. She didn't become closed off. She became discerning. And as she let go of false closeness, she made space for real connection, relationships built on consistency, mutual respect, and emotional safety. The Stoics believed that clarity is strength, and Olivia's story is a modern embodiment of that timeless wisdom. Her life didn't dramatically explode into conflict, but her peace grew, her energy returned, and she no longer feared seeing people for who they really were, because she finally had the tools to respond with grace and courage. So what is the lesson we take from Olivia's story? It's this: clarity is a form of freedom. When you stop chasing approval and start listening to what people show you, not just what they tell you, you begin to build a life that honors your values, not their illusions. In today's world, where social cues are polished and betrayal often wears a smile, we need more than just hope. We need discernment. We need philosophy. And we need to trust that our inner voice is wiser than we've been taught to believe. You don't need to confront everyone who's false. You don't need to keep score. But you do need to pay attention. And once you see clearly, don't look away. Apply this to your life by doing a simple inventory. Who energizes you after a conversation? And who leaves you feeling confused or diminished? Who supports you in private, not just in public? Who do you feel safe being imperfect around? The answers to these questions are the compass toward a life of peace. Now, let's bring this home with a quick reflection. If someone consistently praises you in public but makes passive-aggressive remarks in private, what would you do? A. Call them out directly and ask for clarity. B. Distance yourself quietly and observe their pattern. Comment your answer below, A or B. And now, I want to hear from you. What part of Olivia's journey resonated most with your own experiences? Have you ever ignored your intuition, only to find out it was right all along? Share your perspective in the comments. It might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. If this story opened your eyes or helped you reflect on the people around you, subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us create more content that's honest, thoughtful, and rooted in timeless wisdom. Let's keep growing together.